Alright, Piss and Vinegar day 49. Almost at the big 50. Chest and tricep day. Same as ever for the chest day. I've got what works, and I'm probably not going to change it for a decent amount of time. I mean, I might get back to bench pressing when I get into my bulk, just because even though my bench press is so dysfunctional, when you bulk, your bench press goes up, and it's a nice feeling. It's not really ideal for hypertrophy, especially for me, but I don't know. Today I was like, I kind of want to bench and see what this strength gain is feeling like, because I am gaining strength now that I'm in maintenance phase, but I don't know. There's not much in the way of hypertrophy, so at this point I'm just kind of battling against my ego, but maybe I'll add it back in. Maybe it'll feel better in a month or two. Historically, my bench has felt safer and healthier when I'm in a fluffier state. For whatever reason, I guess there's more nutrients for my joints and stuff to recover, and maybe my leverages are better when I'm a bit fluffier. So we'll see. But right now, I'm really enjoying the dumbbell pressing variations, because these are just going up and up and up. Today, I think I got 2 or 3 reps more than last time. So that's really good for me. I mean, for a new lifter, that's nothing, but for me, that's really good. So yeah, it felt really good. And I also trained a little earlier in the day today. I trained in the afternoon. I felt like when I trained in the afternoon, I had just had lunch, so I had some carbs in me. I had like a kind of oats and strawberry and honey with protein shake, oats basically, and that's a really good pre-workout. There's a lot of good carbs in that. Slow and fast-acting carbs from the honey, but also fast-acting carbs from the honey, slow-acting carbs from the oats. So I felt really kind of more energized. My pumps were actually a little bit better. And because I was training at midday, I was really energized and ready to go. I had more gusto than normal. Whereas normally I train, later at night after I've finished work with clients and stuff. And I haven't got as much energy, and I'm not as keen to do it. And the sun's not out and all these different factors. So I think realistically I should start training around midday. Because also it sets the tone for the rest of the day. Like midday is where you can make or break a day as far as motivation goes to do things. And I get a lot of shit done through my days. Like, I have my clients, but I also try to work on my business. I do a bunch of little chores like clean house, yoga, all these different little things. I pray, all these different things that may or may not get done. But if I train, it sets the kind of motivation, it sets the precedent for the rest of my day to go well. So I think I need to start training earlier in the day, which I should have already been doing, because it's been freezing where I live at nighttime, which also makes you a bit more lethargic. It makes you a lot more lethargic, whereas the heat makes you a little bit more energized as long as it's not too hot. So I think this will be a mainstay. I think I'm going to start training more during midday. Man, my hair is looking fucked up today. I look like a caveman. I forgot to cut this part out, but whatever. There's flies everywhere. I've got some new conditioner. I think it's really not agreeing with my hair, so I might chuck it out and get some new shit, because my hair looks fucked up lately. Like, I look really homeless. Anyway, on to dips. Same thing with dips today. Increased our reps by 2 or 3 reps, I think. I definitely need to build a better dip station rather than this kind of janky thing. The bars roll, the rack kind of shakes, and that just adds to my already unstable shoulders. So I can't really get as stable and press as safely as I'd like to, or not necessarily safely, but just effectively. I can't feel my chest as much as I probably would if I was stable. So I need to buy a dip station, or build one. I'll probably build one realistically, or if I can build a safe one, I will. If I build a few and they don't work, then maybe I'll buy one. But yeah, this just doesn't feel too great as far as I'm just not getting any stability through these bars and shaky rack and stuff. So yeah, and then I do a set to failure. I beat my previous by like 2 or 3 reps, which is really good. And then I do a rest pause. While I was rest pausing, I was setting up the band to do a rest pause and then drop set. So I do like two sets beyond failure on these. This rest pause is a bit too long. And then at the end of my session today, I did a few extra things. I'm going to start a nucleus overload cycle. I haven't done one of these in a long time. I didn't really do it over the cut. Well, for a long time I did it for my forearms, my right forearm. Until very recently, I was training my right forearm on and off pretty much every day, inconsistently, but as many days as I could. I would train my forearms every single day. I would do pronation and wrist curls and stuff for arm wrestling training, which was a form of nucleus overload, and it worked very well for my right forearm. My right forearm is about an inch and a half bigger than my left from just training that forearm every single day for basically 2-3 years or so. So I'm going to start doing that now for my traps and my right forearm still, which you'll see at the end of this workout. So then I did a rest pause on the dips, and then I did a sort of drop set. But by this time, my pecs and triceps were cooked, so I barely got like fucking 2 or 3 reps here. It wasn't really ideal, but yeah, I'm enjoying the dips. It's previously what I would do is I'd have one heavy movement for chest, and then the rest was kind of like weird variations, or like too many fly variations, or I would do like lighter compound movements. But this day is perfect. I do the heavy incline press and I do the heavy dips, and that works really well for me. So that's what I'm doing from now on. Because in the past, I'd always get psychologically put off by doing 2 compound movements on the same muscle group. Because like, if, say for example, I do a heavy bench press, if I do a really heavy bench press to failure, and then I go on to barbell bench press, that is, and then I move on to a, say, incline dumbbell press to failure, that incline dumbbell press isn't going to be as strong as it could have been if I hadn't have done that bench press first, and vice versa. So obviously there's a little bit of drop off on movements after doing a compound movement previously, and that would kind of get in my head, and I would often just do one compound movement for chest so that the other one didn't suffer. But I realized that's kind of stupid, because okay, let's say for the dip I get a rep or 2 less than I do on the incline press. Perfect example actually is yesterday I did back, right? I did a heavy Yates row first, which is compound rowing movement, and then I went on to do the chin up second, and normally I do the chin up first. Well, my chin up got 1 rep less yesterday than it normally would have, and that could have just been an off day too. But basically I got an extra one less rep, maybe 2 max. But that's the thing, like if the training is always that, then it doesn't matter, because if you progressively overload the next session to an extra rep beyond that, that's just the standard now. The standard for that chin up, the standard for that compound movement is just now slightly weaker, but if you always do it in that order, then it doesn't matter, because that's just the standard. So training needs to be standardized, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like if you do a heavy movement first that you can't do a second heavy movement. It's just that second heavy movement's going to be slightly weaker, but always do it in that order, and progression will stay exact. Progression needs to always stay exact. So you can't switch around the movements, obviously, because otherwise then the next week, if you start off with the chin up first, now all of a sudden you've got an artificially stronger chin up because you didn't pre-exhaust it through the row or whatever. So the order of the exercise always has to stay the same. But yeah, I've gotten past that mental hurdle, and I'm starting to do dips after my incline press. So rant over for that part. Now I'm doing tricep extensions. I slipped a little bit on the tricep extension and kind of jarred my wrist. My ulnar bone. The ulnar bone is a very loose joint because it doesn't actually connect. The ulnar bone, which is the big bump that you see on the outside of your wrist, doesn't actually connect to your hand. So the radius, which is the inside bone, does, and that's very stable, but the ulnar doesn't, which allows you to do ulnar deviation, which is basically when you wave your hands, essentially. So sometimes when I do, and I already have very unstable joints, sometimes when I do tricep extensions, if I don't make sure my grip is like really firm and set, it will kind of slip out for a second, and it really jars my wrist. So that's what happened there. No injury, just a temporary pain from my fucked up loose joints. But other than that, it was all good. So started doing some aggressive kind of cheat reps on the drop set here, getting the lats involved a little bit. That way I can still get more of a contraction. One of the beauties of having a home gym is when you do these kind of like schizo looking movements where you're doing really heavy cheat reps, you don't get like little faggy twinks coming up to you in the gym going, "Hey bro, you should keep it strict, man. I know my I know your dick's thicker than my wrist, but like, dude, you should really keep that form straight. Like, you don't get that kind of bullshit that used to piss me off to no end. So you get to do some cheat reps that gets you a bit more extra time and attention, a bit more volume, a bit more muscle damage, without some fucking overzealous retard that doesn't know anything about exercise science getting up you about it. So yeah, I feel bad for any of you guys watching who are still in commercial gyms and have to deal with that sometimes. I have a funny story about that actually. Once I remember I was doing rack pulls, really heavy rack pulls. This guy came over and was like, "Oh, that's not how you did deadlifts." And I'm like, "That's not a deadlift, it's a rack pull, it's for my traps." And he's like, "Yeah, well that's ego lifting, man." And I'm like, "Well, okay, you give it a go then. You try and lift it." And it wasn't that heavy, it was like 200 kilos, which is pretty light for a rack pull, really. Like, there's people out there that rack pull way more than that. But anyway, this guy, to cut it short, because I'm about to explain what I'm doing now, this new experiment. This dude went to do it, and he tore his fucking bicep. And I mean, it's kind of fucked up, but it is funny. It's like the exact example of that, you know, do you even lift twink that doesn't even look like he lifts, that's giving bigger people advice, and they get their karma. Well, he got his karma, which was great. It was very funny. I had to hold back a laugh. So anyway, moving on to my nucleus overload experiment. I'm doing some shrugs here. So what I'm doing is I'm basically getting a weight that I can do for maybe 30, 40 reps, and really high reps here to get as much blood flow into the muscle as possible, because one of the components of nucleus overload that people miss is the blood flow. You're trying to also increase your sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, or sarcomere size, with more sarcoplasm volume of liquid in the sarcoplasm. You're also trying to increase capillary mass. It's not just increasing nuclei. And if you don't know what nucleus overload is, it's basically training every single day in order to artificially create more volume, more frequency, in order to increase your nuclei within the muscle, which is essentially, in layman's terms, muscle memory. So I'm choosing a weight I can do, 20, 30, 40 reps with, and I'm taking it all the way to 100 reps, and I just do very short rest pauses in between. So I do like a 10-second rest, keep banging it out, and I just keep going until I get 100 reps. And this accumulates a bunch of blood pump into the traps. So this is what I'm going to do for probably about 6 to 8 months. I'm just going to train traps every single day. I kept fucking forgetting to do it, and I had to end up writing a huge thing on my garage door saying traps and pronation, which basically just means at the end of this session, if I'm starting to walk out my garage door and I forget to do this daily nucleus overload, I see that bang in my face telling me to do it. So that's how I'm remembering to do it. And this is brutal, man. Like, I'm not used to high reps. I'm very used to, 6 to 10, 8 to 12, max 10 to 15 with my high intensity training. So I haven't done these high reps, muscular endurance range, sort of rep range in a long time. So yeah, I was getting a bit of a sweat on, and I was getting a pretty crazy pump. And that's the whole idea. And progressive overload on nucleus overload isn't overly important. The way I'm going to progress this is basically once I get 100 reps in a row, then it's time to increase the weight by maybe 10 kilos or something. But progressive overload isn't really what you're looking for on nucleus overload. You're more looking to just increase the blood volume into the muscle to increase those last three things I just said, and including potential hyperplasia. But that's far less likely to occur. It's more just to increase the sarcoplasm and the nuclei density within the muscle. So all props to Alpha Destiny. No, not Alpha Destiny. Now I'm done with that. Not Alpha Destiny. Who's the guy that popularized this? Megan from 3D Alpha. I've been watching him since I was a little lad, back when I was 15. And nowadays, I look back on a lot of his advice and I think, fuck, why the fuck did I listen to that guy? He barely looked like, he was always kind of like, too bare moded. Like, he was 25% body fat plus and never really had a great physique, and training was kind of just retarded, really. But some of his advice was actually really good, one of which was his discovery on nucleus overload. That is a game changer for naturals. So props to him. No ill will against his other advice, it's just not very good. And then this is the second nucleus overload thing I'm doing, which is doing pronation with my right arm. So now that my right forearm is getting quite strong, I don't want to be training it every single day because it will go into my recovery. So I can't do the wrist curls, the pronation, all the different arm wrestling vectors that arm wrestlers do on a daily basis whilst also doing bodybuilding. So what I'm going to do is just train the most important thing to me, which is pronation, and I'm just going to do it with my right arm. So I take it 1 set to failure. I know that sounds insane. You shouldn't train a muscle to failure every day. Normally you shouldn't, but if it's just one arm and it's just the pronator, which is a very, very small muscle, and forearms recover very fast, they don't put a huge strain on your central nervous system. Because at the end of the day, the reason you don't train to failure on a frequent basis isn't because muscles don't recover. Muscles recover quite fast, anywhere between 24 to 72 hours, depending on the intensity of effort. The central nervous system, however, takes at least 5 to 6 days if you truly take a set to failure, especially heavy compound movements like deadlifts, bench, and squats, etc. But with a movement like this, it's very small and it's just one arm. Maybe I'll overtrain my forearm a little bit, in which case the progression will go down, in which case I'll know that it's time to back off. But like I said, I've been training my right forearm every single day for about 3 years with arm wrestling training, so I think I'll be fine. But this is an experiment. So setting up my pronation bar here, I need to figure out a better way of setting this up, maybe with a karate belt or something, because it's a little bit primitive and it's slightly inconsistent with the rope tension. But for now, this is fine. I'm just kind of still mucking around with it. And yeah, you'll see the pronation in a second. If you don't know anything about arm wrestling, or if you don't even know what the pronator muscle is, essentially it's a small muscle on the forearm that actually gives you quite an aesthetic benefit from a bodybuilding perspective, but then from an arm wrestling perspective, it allows you to essentially take away the person's hand's strength, which is a very important aspect in arm wrestling. So yeah, bodybuilding wise, gets you big forearms. In this case, it will make my right forearm even bigger. My left forearms are pretty big because I do arm wrestling days with both arms, but then obviously my right arm, which is the preferred arm wrestling arm for me because I'm right-handed, is quite a bit bigger and stronger because yeah, that's part of the experiment, is putting as much focus on one arm as possible. Props to Devin Larat, who is the arm wrestler that popularized this idea. Now, a lot of arm wrestlers have been doing this for a long time, but he took this mainstream when he started training only his right arm back in like 2019, and he's had crazy phenomenal gains. Like his right forearm is like 1.5 inches bigger than his left, maybe even bigger. He had bone growth, like his radius and ulnar bone grew, or like at least the joint grew, which gives him the illusion of a longer arm. And like the wrists and hands thickness, everything just got way bigger on that dude. So I decided, fuck it, I'll start giving it a go. Probably about in 2021, I started doing the right arm only. My fucking stupid squat rack decided to like kind of pop off and stop working when I'm halfway through the set. So this was a very janky set. Overall, everything wasn't really lined up right. The bar was too high. The rope was kind of snagging on the carabiner. So I'm gonna have to figure out a little bit more effective way of setting this up. But that's part of the fun. I like building random pieces of equipment. Anyway, slightly longer day today because obviously the nucleus overload. In the future, I might start doing kind of videos that are somewhat unrelated to fitness, like as I do my nucleus overload phase, when I'm not describing what I'm doing because it's just the same thing every single day very often. I might start talking about, life stuff. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.